I like to watch the design and home improvement television shows. One program I watch is Flea Market Flip. For those of you who have not seen it, the premise of the program is that two-person teams are given 1 hour and $500 to buy 3 pieces of furniture or 3 items at a flea market that they can then sort of redesign or up-design in some way. Then they are given 1 day in a workshop to rehab and to design their, design their items. And then they try to sell them at another flea market. And the team that makes the most profit wins $5,000. Before the team start on their mad dash through the flea market that they're at to find their items that they're going to up-design, they are given a theme for their projects like mid-century modern vibe or Moroccan chic. One day, the program host, Laura Spencer, gave the teams the design theme of wabi sabi. That was the first time that, excuse me just for a moment. That's the first time that I had actually heard that term. And I wondered what was the connection between the Japanese condiment, wasabi, and repurposing of a flea market object. Maybe the component had to have a green element in it. Or the design had to somehow be hot or spicy or somehow denote power and intensity. Now, of course, wabi-sabi isn't about a green spicy condiment. Wabi-sabi is a Japanese philosophy often applied to art, but also about a way a person can live. Our flowers down here are my attempt at wabi-sabi design on that. Considering that life seems to have an ongoing April Fool's joke on all of us, by somehow throwing that proverbial monkey wrench into any effort we make to always be perfect, perhaps I thought we may want to consider a less stressful approach to life by following the path suggested by wabi-sabi. Wabi-sabi is a worldview focused on the power, beauty, and peace of spirit that comes from accepting transience, imperfection, and incompleteness. It is a concept derived from the Buddhist teachings of the 3 marks or the 3 characteristics of existence of all life: impermanence, uneasiness or uncomfortableness, and emptiness or absence of self-nature. Wabi means fresh and simple. It denotes simplicity and quietude, incorporating the notion of rustic beauty that's either made by nature or by humans. Sabi means beauty stemming from age. It refers to the patina of age and the concept that changes due to use or age may make an object more beautiful and valuable. I keep saying that every morning when I look in the mirror. It also incorporates appreciation for the cycle of life. Now, there are 3 components to this wisdom of wabi-sabi. The first one is that all things are impermanent. All things ultimately come to nothing in the end. Everything, though they may appear to be hard, or they are hard, inert, or solid in appearance, like mountains or planets or stars, ultimately wear down and come to an end. This even applies to intangible things like reputation, scientific theorems, and great literature that also eventually fade into oblivion. The second component of the wisdom of wabi-sabi is that all things are imperfect. Nothing that exists is without imperfection. when we look closely at things, even things that may have the appearance of perfection, we will see flaws. That sharp, smooth edge of a brand new razor blade really has pits and chips and variations in it. A piece of music that is considered to be perfectly constructed can be revised and revised again. Think of Beethoven's Leonora overtures. And even in the exact perfect science, quote unquote, perfect science of mathematics, there can be imperfection. Now, I don't understand the details. I have difficulty enough just doing addition, but much as higher math. But I've read that there are mathematicians that say there are mathematical statements that are inconsistent with another mathematical statement, and both can be accepted as true. Somehow, in mathematics, there is imperfection. And the third point, the third element of the wisdom of wabi-sabi is that all things are incomplete. All things, including the universe itself, are in constant, never-ending state of becoming or dissolving. An end point is really an arbitrary designation of a moment or a point along the way when we say that something is finished, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it really is finished. There can always be more, there will always be change. Consider, when is a plant finished or a plant complete? Is it complete when it flowers? Is it complete when it goes to seed? Is it complete when it turns into compost? Is it complete when the atoms of that flower are reconstituted? Wabi-sabi is the beauty of a single lily in a vase matched with a bent leaf versus a dozen perfectly shaped roses. It's 3 old suitcases in a stack, like on the cover of the Order of Service, instead of matching glossy new hard-sided Samsonite cases. It's the elegance of an heirloom knit sweater rather than the $2,000 Saint Laurent sweater from Neiman Marcus. Or perhaps it is the mixture of different eras of furniture in a living room rather than a perfectly matched set. It is the simplicity of a 11-word poem, Autumn Twilight. The wreath on the door lifts in the wind, rather than a 50-stanza poem with a set rhyming scheme. Now, this idea is very different than our Western concept of things. The Western world tends to seem to prize monumental and spectacular, and preferably perfection. And many of us get caught up in this notion of perfection, not just doing something right, but a compulsion to be perfect, to do everything right all the time, an expectation that everyone around us is supposed to do everything right all the time. As author and lecturer on innovation Andrew Rasigi notes, we humans revere the best coffee, the best cars, the best phones, the best schools, the best doctors, the best chefs, the best athletes, the best coaches, the best designers, the best actors, the best of the best doing their very best. He goes on to say, to highlight our admiration for excellence, we have human-engineered lists, ribbons, ceremonies, red carpets, awards, and shiny trophies, prizes, certifications, and halls of fame. We simply cannot satiate our collective appetite for awesomeness. Now, it makes sense. It makes sense to work hard to get a project or to get something done right. The market for the worst is very limited. But it does not make sense to try to be perfect in everything. It just does not make sense because it's impossible. Now, it's possible that people get into this intense drive to try to be perfect from an early age. to keep that endorphin rush that we get from praise coming, or to assuage feelings of inadequacy, however those have developed in us. And for whatever reason, this drive to develop can cause us to get caught up in this maddening pursuit of being perfect, of looking at an email or a memo from a colleague and finding the one typo and being concerned that there's a typo in it. I had a boss like that. I eventually left. Because we want everything, like I said, to be perfect. And perfection, though, is really a subjective distinction. What is perfect for one person is not perfect for another. My perfect room temperature is inevitably too cool or too warm for another person. That perfect wine for one person is probably too dry or too sweet for another person. And then the question, when is something perfect? Is that perfect wine, or is that wine perfect 2 years after it's bottled, or 2 years and 2 months after it's bottled? Is a rose perfect just as it buds and starts to open, or is it perfect when it is fully open? The relentless pursuit of perfection in possessions, in relationships, and achievements does have some major downsides for us. Now, it can foster hasty judgments because we want to move along and get something done, and to be perfect, we don't pause to reconsider. It often does not leave room for creativity or growth. It can come out from a spontaneous idea that's going to change the way we're doing something. And wanting perfection all the time means a person will always be living with disappointment, either in themselves or others. Striving to be perfect in everything all the time is a never-ending, frustrating, limiting battle against the realities of life. It is worshiping a false god. It is idolatry. This is where living into wabi-sabi may make life more fulfilling, less stressful, and actually more spiritual. Wabi-sabi invites a pause. It opens space in the mind and the heart for acceptance and forgiveness, and to be present for this moment, not letting small flaws, that typo in a perfectly good memo, disrupt one's appreciation for what is going on in life or for the message being given us. As singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen put it, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So we can ask, how does wabi-sabi play out in the practical art of living? In relationships, wabi-sabi is when people choose to deliberately accept another person where they are, imperfect, unfinished, and mortal, rather than taking them on as a project to fix them. A wabi-sabi relationship leaves a person time and emotional energy just to enjoy the present moment with the other person. Wabi-sabi eating suggests making a meal is to be a creative, joyful act, more than a professionally plated version of a magazine recipe. I guess unless you are a professional chef. In wabi-sabi eating is to be approached not as a test of perfection with the threat of failing hanging over our head, but rather enjoying what is plated before us. And wabi-sabi eating means taking time to enjoy the meal, not gulping it down as fast as you can to move on to something else, to try to be perfect at that. Wabi-sabi beauty is recognizing, as in life itself, that the changes in the body is constant, and it needs to be embraced, not fought. Wabi-sabi beauty is not about relinquishing self-care, but recognizing and adjusting the process of aging, not trying to keep the looks up that we had 2 decades ago. Wabi-sabi in the work environment is aligning our actions and words to our values, being authentic and letting that reflection be our best self. And it is finding the right niche in our work, in our jobs, for our skills and talents and personality. And when there isn't a match, it's time to move on. Wabi-sabi in garden means not obsessing on every plant and every border, looking home and garden picture perfect all the time. I confess this is a growing edge for me, but now living in a huge yard surrounded by trees and wild shrubs and leaves every place, it has become necessary for my peace of mind. I'm still working on it. Wabi-sabi gardening allows a person to appreciate the beauty of a bent tree or a broken tree or a pile of leaves at its base. And besides learning to live in a less hectic manner and releasing us from the trap of perfectionism, the path of Wabi-sabi has a significant spiritual component that I think we Unitarian Universalists can easily relate to. The way of Wabi-sabi reminds us that we are all transient beings on this planet, that our bodies, as well as the material world around us, is in the process of returning to dust. Nature's cycle of growth and decay and erosion are embodied in the frayed edges, rust, and liver spots. When we exert energy on things we cannot control, it only empowers the negative in us. Approaching life with this wabi-sabi mindset, we learn to embrace both the glory and the melancholy that can be found in these marks of passing time. And the way of wabi-sabi that truly Unitarian Universalists can honor and can understand is that it honors the worth and dignity of human beings as they are created by the universe. Human beings are flawed. Human beings have emotions. We have our own personalities. And by recognizing these conditions in our living and being, we are truly honoring and affirming the other and our own inherent worth and dignity, and giving ourselves and the other permission to live fully as they are. Now, this philosophy, I admit, this philosophy is a growing edge for me. It doesn't come easy. But I decided I really want to try to live this in my days ahead. So actually, you may see an email come through that has a typo in it that I'm not worried about correcting. As my friend and colleague, the Reverend James Ford, once noted, there is the beauty and grace of this moment as it is. This is where we find wisdom. This right here and now moment, with all of its imperfections, its bent corners, its patina of age, its impermanence, is the great play of existence, of life and death. I invite you then to consider joining me on this journey, this path, of perhaps finding a more comfortable way of living, a way of wabi-sabi, a way of letting existence play out, a way of allowing the beauty of what is, rather than what we want it to be, to guide us in our living. So be it.